This episode of the Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast is brought to you in part by No Judges Needed BJJ Apparel and Lavender Lane CBD products. You can use the promo code JJT for 20% off your first order at No Judges Needed, and the code JJTimes20, all uppercase. Last two items are numerical for 20% off your first order of CBD products. Thank you very much for sticking with us. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this installment of the Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast. I am your host, Kevin Gallagher. Unfortunately, my co-host, Kevin Bradley, is experiencing some technical difficulties with his internet, or he's doing some other unforeseen circumstance. We will not comment on that, but he wishes he could be here to interview our very special guest today, Roli Delgado, UFC coach of Bryce Mitchell and former Tough alumni, UFC fighter himself. Very special guest. I'm super excited to have him here on the show today. So, Roli, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, man. I'm pumped to be here.
Yeah, man. I'm excited about this one too, bro. I got to take a seminar with you, right before this whole shitstorm went down with the COVID, probably about 3 months ago. And I got to pick your brain and talk to you and Roli and stuff like that, man. And you were not only an amazing jiu-jitsu practitioner, you're also, you have a very good knowledge of the sport. And as a black belt, I enjoy talking to people that have that knowledge of the thing that I love. So thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, man. I appreciate the compliment. And I like talking to other folks that are kind of cut from the same cloth as well.
Yeah. Cool, man. So first of all, how are you? Everything good? Your gym doing all right? You hanging in there, getting your stuff done?
Yeah. We're hanging in there. And that's the main thing. A lot of businesses are going down, but we're going to make it. And we're hanging in there for sure.
Yeah. You've been in business for quite some time now, right? 14 years, I think you said.
Yeah. 14 years, man. So we're entrenched and we don't live above our means. So, we're just going to hunker down and we'll come out of this thing on the other side.
That's crazy, man. Just to think of a gym that's been open for freaking 14 years, man. Like it's nuts. Like that's a long time, man. That's a long time to be teaching jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. I mean, I was teaching before then even, but yeah, 2006 we started and we just never stopped, man. We were in front of the curve for sure.
Were you a jiu-jitsu practitioner first and foremost, or did you have other fighting experience prior to that?
No, I wrestled 2 semesters in high school, and I sucked, but I liked it. And then I started jiu-jitsu, and at that time, that was 1998.
Wow.
Jiu-jitsu was the means to the end was MMA. So I always did jiu-jitsu for MMA. It wasn't until the last 7 or 8 years I started doing more sport jiu-jitsu.
Let's talk a little bit about what the jiu-jitsu scene was like back then in 1998, because I mean that predates me by freaking 10 years, 12 years almost. Like a lot of guys, myself included, like I go back thinking I went back to 2010, 2008. That was a long time ago, but like a lot of guys don't realize how different training jiu-jitsu was back in 1998. It wasn't the same as it was now.
No, you can't. It's like talking to kids that grew up with the internet. Like right. I can't really make it make sense for you how small it was, how basic jiu-jitsu was. Like when I started jiu-jitsu, spider guard was how you got to a triangle. It wasn't a guard. Like we didn't know what else to do from there. And like I said, we were essentially doing jiu-jitsu for MMA. I'm in Arkansas, so we were in 98. We were still a couple years behind a lot of other parts of the country. But man, we did it. We would travel to Nashville, travel to Dallas, travel where we needed to do tournaments. And we were watching VHS videos at that time and just doing what we could with what we had. And it was slow. It was slow going back in the day, man.
How much do you feel like due to that evolution of the sport application of jiu-jitsu, how much do you think we've gone away from what you believe jiu-jitsu at its core is, or do you feel like we haven't? Do you feel it's kind of just deviated in such a direction for some reason or not?
Well, it's a huge sport now, obviously. So you have a lot of people that are in jiu-jitsu now recreationally, whereas back in the day, like if you did jiu-jitsu, you freaking did jiu-jitsu, and you were tough. Like right. you were tough back in the day if you did jiu-jitsu. Nobody was making money. nobody was going to put kid gloves on you and just like fluff your hair for you. Like we were just hard-nosed guys that wanted to do this crazy shit that we knew that was self-evident to us that this was how a fight was going to happen, and it was real. And we were doing it, and we were the early adopters. And a lot of those old school guys are still in the game now, running successful gyms that I kind of came up with. See, I was 15 then, so like I'm 38, right? I'm not a young guy, but like compared to the old school guys, I'm still young. I was just a kid. A lot of these guys were 19, 20 years old, 5, 8 years older than me coming up. And I was able to look up to these guys, and they were all tough guys. Now jiu-jitsu, I mean, you still got to be tough to compete and win at like major tournaments, but there's a lot of people that do jiu-jitsu and they take it seriously, but they're just not tough guys. And I think that's one of the big difference, like hard-nosed, like almost wrestler types, the beginning jiu-jitsu guys. They weren't just lazy. We were just doing jiu-jitsu. People were winning off their back, and so we learned how to fight off our back. And then when that got hard, we learned how to wrestle and got on, that's the thing I remember. It was a smaller niche then. Now, I mean, it's just such a huge sport. You're going to have all kinds of people in it.
Yeah, I think I talked to Robert Drysdale about a week or so ago when I asked him kind of the same question. We kind of had the same thought process on that. And like, I think it's important to realize that like the jiu-jitsu schools that we have now in the world of, student retention was a different philosophy. It just wasn't the same. Back then, it was the law of the strong survive. You went in the room, they kicked your ass. If you were going to stay, you were going to learn how to get an ass beaten. If you didn't, you beat it. We've got intro programs now. We've got all different things that are motivated to try to keep students in the gym because, I agree with it and disagree with it. I can see where you talk about how, there's a different level of toughness, but I also believe that like toughness can be learned
100
if you retain them. It was just a difference of philosophical approaches.
I agree, and I don't think that's the way to be. I think we need to build people up, and we need to separate people. If you're going to get offended, so what's the problem with somebody going, not hurting you, but what's the problem with somebody going too hard? The problem is it's your ego. Because if I'm rolling with you, right, and you're taking it up a notch, the worst thing that's going to happen is you tap me. So what's the problem?
Right.
If I only want to go 70% and you're outworking me a little bit, there's no problem. So, but people aren't built that way. So people get frustrated and they get their panties in a wad. So I agree. Like, I think it's a better system now. We're reaching way more people with jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is definitely changing people's lives. I have beginners classes myself. But we can also, when Bryce Mitchell's getting ready for a fight and I got Jamie Canuto, the armbar king, and TJ Brown fights in the UFC, and we got these like hard-nosed guys that are going to train hard, man, we're not going to unleash that beast on a recreational person. Right. So we separate it. It's all good.
Yeah, in one of the true beauties of jiu-jitsu, one of the things that I think about when I think about at its core what makes this sport so great is just what you said there, is that like you learn how to overcome those demons. We can go 100% sparring with one another in a jiu-jitsu match where, all we do is tap. If you catch me in an armbar, I tap. You can't do that when you're boxing. You can't do that when you're doing, Muay Thai or when you're doing Krav Maga or some of the other fucking shit out there because, there's so much injury that can evolve. Like when I'm going with you full speed, like I can tap and I can move on with my life. So these guys, if you take your time and you wean them into the process and you get them involved in the process and slowly allow them to take a little more baby steps into the deep end to where maybe eventually, they don't go with Bryce all the time. And maybe once or twice when you want to go out there and give it a shot and see where you're at, like you learn how to be tough by doing that because that's what jiu-jitsu is all about. You got to overcome those insecurities and it'll change you. Like I said, I always say this a lot. I'll say it every podcast. I'll say it again. Like jiu-jitsu is one of the only things in the world that I can possibly say that takes the meek and makes them strong and makes the arrogant and strong and gives them some humility and some meekness.
Mm-hmm. I agree 100%, man. And I think jiu-jitsu is for everybody, man.
Yeah,
it can be.
If you do it the right way, if you take your time and you coach and I did a lot of private lessons with guys, and my guys that come in, they got a lot of money and they're rich, they don't want to get their asses kicked, but you kind of fool them into it. You kind of like lead them along. They're like, oh no, don't worry about that. But yeah, go ahead and roll anyway, because that's what's going to make you better. And you're going to thank me for it eventually. You know, you got to kind of like fool them into that shit.
100. Yeah, I know what you mean.
So let's talk a little bit about, you know, I love you and I want to talk to you and you're an amazing guy, but, you know, let's like make no bones about it. Like, you know, Bryce Mitchell is the darling of the jiu-jitsu community right now after his past two performances in the UFC. Let's talk a little bit about what it was like watching him in his prior UFC event and how that went down for you.
Yeah, this most recent fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we knew that could happen because we have a lot of high-level jiu-jitsu at my gym, and Bryce is, as far as Nogi is concerned, he's, you know, top of the food chain, unless I have a visitor in or something. So we knew that could happen, but I had a lot of respect for Rosa, and it's unknown. You know, I watched this film. I didn't see anything that made me think like Damian Maia, but he's good. And I thought, man, maybe he's got a tricky guard. I don't know. But you know, it was not surprising. I was saying, and I wasn't the only one, that Bryce Mitchell's the Damian Maia of 145. I was saying that before he was in the UFC, and I'm just really happy that we're seeing that.
Well, I mean, and you're absolutely right about Rosa. Like, that kid's legit. I mean, he's a fucking Laborio black belt. There ain't too many of them running around. Like, Laborio is one of the pillars of the fucking jiu-jitsu community. Like, he's one of the greatest jiu-jitsu minds of all time. And to say that you have a black belt from Ricardo Laborio means some shit. And to watch the way Bryce, you know, completely dominated that fight was amazing to me. Like, he was winning positionally over and over again. And someone as talented as Rosa just couldn't get him off him. It was like just like a nightmare to watch. What are some of the things that you think make Bryce as good as he is?
Extremely strong, grip strength, static strength, very strong, very coachable, always has been, learns from losses and listens to his coaches, trusts his coaches, 100% believes in himself. And there's been different times that I've worked with him and I've seen that in him. And it's something I didn't have when I was fighting. And that helps reinforce that positive behavior that he does in fighting. And then people think that he gasses in the third round because when he starts working hard, he carries himself as if he's fatigued. He breathes a certain way. But man, the kid's one of the best cardio machines I've ever seen. I think his lungs and his heart anatomically are bigger than the average person's. He's got, not only is he going longer, he's pushing harder in every round. He's outworking you in every scramble. Go back and watch the fight with Rosa. At the end of the bell, he's still pushing at the end of the rounds instead of like taking that hesitation. So all of those things.
Watching him fight reminded me a lot. You said Maia. I thought a lot of Khabib, maybe with not as many strikes involved, but that type of pressure, that suffocating pressure that just never gives you a chance to breathe and never gives you an opportunity to get back up, just grinding in your face the entire time. And it was fun to watch, man. It was really, really impressive to watch. Really impressive to watch.
Well, jiu-jitsu wise, he's stellar. Now he's really a Nogi guy. He doesn't train in the Ghee. He's a very good wrestler. Very, very good wrestler. And he trains with everybody. And when I say that, I mean, he trains with the white belts and the blue belts and the purple belts. He trains with everybody and he just has fun with them. And he puts them in all sorts of submissions. And that's a secret for the great grapplers, that they'll train with everybody. And it's like, he did an interview recently. They're not going to publish it because it was at the UFC, and then like the UFC didn't want the media there doing interviews because of COVID. So the guy was like, I can't publish it. But he said, you know, talking about the difference, this is just to let you into Bryce's mind. They were saying, what was the difference between this camp and others? Well, he only had like 3 main training partners: Jamie Canuto, world champion, TJ Brown, UFC fighter, very, very good grappler as well. And then another guy named Jeremiah Cullum, who is a black belt in jiu-jitsu and a really tough guy. And he was saying, like, one of the differences is they say iron sharpens iron, you know, but the problem is when iron sharpens iron, it leaves a lot of rivets and chunks of iron gets broken off. And he's like, you kind of need the whetstones the blue belts to roll with, so that you're not getting beat up in the process and you're able to work your offense and develop and tighten up things that you can't do when you're fighting to win. You're fighting to survive. But so this camp, he didn't have as many whetstones to train with because the gym was closed, but he's always training with everybody. He's not just like, oh no, I'm only training with the black belts today.
Yeah. We had one of my head instructor, Rob Kahn, he's a horse crazy black belt, and he likes to use the term the 70-30 rule. It goes like this: if when you're training with someone, you need to train 30% of the time you're training with guys that you push with, you work hard with, that are going to make you go that hard. But the other 70% of the time, and I might have this backwards, but you get the turn like that. The other 70% of the time, you're training with guys that you're better than, the guys that you can work on your moves with, that you can practice your techniques on to get better. Because in striking, to make the analogy, in striking, you got heavy bags. So you can heavy bag all day long and drill. You don't have to worry about getting hit back, and you can work on your new stuff. Like in jiu-jitsu, we don't have heavy bags. We've got white belts. So there's some thought to that. I like that analogy you got from Bryce.
Yeah. I believe in that a lot. Active drilling. Because when you're rolling with people that much, where the levels the gap is that big, you're drilling, you're messing around, you're farting around, and drilling's boring. Same jiu-jitsu guys don't like the drill for the most part. I mean, they act like it on Instagram, but we don't like the drill.
Nobody wants to fucking drill.
Yeah, we want to roll. So let's stop fucking faking it and just grab some white belts, make them feel good. And so you pass their guard, you let them recover. You don't tell them you let them. Then you pass their guard again.
Right.
And they recover. And then at the end of the round, you tell them, like, great job, man. Dude, you kept recovering your guard. Like, that was perfect. They feel good. You got in 20 guard passes. Everybody wins.
And part of the process of a white belt, I mean, white belt is, there's what they'll say, you got to be the nail before the hammer. Like, white belt, you are the damn nail, and that's your job. Your job is to get your ass kicked and to learn how to deal with that. And then eventually when you realize, okay, I'm not going to die anymore, I figured out how to survive, you give you your blue belt. That's what it takes to get your blue belt.
Yeah.
So one of the things I think about Bryce when I watch him, so how long has he been training for, first of all?
Ooh, I think he's been training for somewhere around 7 or 8 years.
Okay,
but I always wanted to do this. Ma, the meatloaf.
Yeah, right. All right.
So, all right. Yeah, he's been training.
You actually got meatloaf. That's pretty fun now, right?
Yeah, that would have been funny if it was meatloaf.
Yeah, that would have been funny if a plate of meatloaf came over.
Yeah.
He's a purple belt still, right?
Bryce, no, he's a black belt.
Oh, he's a black belt. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that. I thought he was still a purple belt.
No, he's a black belt, and so Bryce started training in Searcy, Arkansas, under one of my oldest training partners, and he always cross trained at my gym with me. And then the last, I'd say 1.5 to 2 years, he came over full time to my gym. So, but he is a black belt under my good friend William McLaughlin. And he is there's levels to this, and he's a black belt.
Right. No shit.
Yeah.
He's insane. Like I look at him, and I really could not get over just watching how amazingly dominant he was against someone that knows jiu-jitsu, man. Against someone that, he had a hard time completing some finishes. And I remember I was on the podcast, my other podcast I do with Sonny Parlin, and he made some comments about he wasn't finishing that arm triangle. He wasn't finishing all this stuff. I was like, yeah, because the guy he's going against is, also a phenomenal jiu-jitsu practitioner. So it wasn't like he was out there with a blue belt or a white belt. But watch.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'll say this too. And this is no disrespect to Rosa, but Rosa was in a lot of survival mode that fight. In a way that, let's say you're 5 times better than me, Kevin, and we're rolling. I can stop you from tapping me.
Right.
But I'm never going to have a chance of winning. Right. But if I go after you, you're probably going to tap me, but I might tap you.
Right.
And I feel like Rosa in most of that fight was just buying time until there's no more time left.
He didn't want to get hit too much pride to do something stupid as a to get finished.
I really believe that he did not want to get finished because he talked a little trash about the fight, and again, man, I'm not dogging him at all, but had he could have made a better effort to get up off the bottom, but if he did, he probably would have got subbed. So he took the decision loss until and I don't think he did that like consciously. I think he was hoping Bryce would get tired because on film it looks like he gets tired. But so yeah, he didn't finish those subs, but it's hard to sub somebody that's really good. And Rosa was known for being durable, anyways. And I'm telling you, when Bryce gets that arm triangle on me and I've got the skinny neck, I tap.
Yeah,
it's like he's got a good arm triangle, and but like when you film lies, and so when someone's watching that film, they're going to say like, well, you can try to build a narrative, but you'll see in Bryce's next fight, and his one after that, like his jiu-jitsu really is amazing.
So one more question about Bryce, and this is the one that everyone wants to know. So like, where the hell did he get so good at doing that goddamn twister? I don't think I've ever seen anyone in the history of forget MMA, jiu-jitsu in particular, be able to go to that twister with as high regularity and have it be as threatening as he does it. Where did he learn those things? What are some of any idea where that came from?
Oh, he learned it on YouTube.
Yeah,
he learned it on YouTube, and he rolls with everybody. So he starts doing twisters to white belts and blue belts and purple belts and brown belts and every single black belt that's at my gym. I mean, he could twister us all.
Yeah.
And I'd like to take credit for that. The twister, that's Eddie Bravo putting it on YouTube,
right?
And him watching it.
Yeah, and just being having the. I mean, you could take credit for building his jiu-jitsu mind, but it was his mind that went in and picked the pieces apart, like the true jiu-jitsu black belt that he is. Because I could do that myself. Like I can watch things on Instagram and video and be like, oh wow, that's pretty cool. Like let me toy around with it. Let me fool with that. Let me find out how that works as you get older and you kind of have fun with it. Like it might not be one of your go-tos, maybe it does, but it's some things you play around with. But I just thought it was amazing to see someone that takes something that, the twister is cool, but in MMA, a lot of times it's considered kind of a gimmicky thing. There's a reason why it's only been finished, 2 times in the UFC, because it's just not something you consider to be an MMA technique. But to see him be able to execute it, first of all, finish his first fight ever with it, and then God, it was like he was floating from that arm triangle, and then when Rosa would pull the arm across or pull it out, he would dive through right into the twister and back and forth and back and forth and back into the mountain in those three, like his three-peat, and it was almost unstoppable.
Yeah, it's it all stems from basic wrestling. That's the so like the gym that I'm at, Westside MMA, we have the jiu-jitsu, which comes from like this GF team lineage. And then we had Billy Robinson, who was like the last of the great catch wrestlers, trained Sakuraba, Josh Barnett. He trained at my gym for a long time. And then we've had a good wrestling influence from other people because of and Sambo and stuff from different sources, and because we've always done so much MMA. So we're doing stuff like we're doing a lot of stuff off the wrist control, which I mean everybody's doing now in MMA. You know what I mean? But they're doing it more so from when people are trying to get up off the fence, and they're grabbing and feeding the wrist. But Bryce is doing a lot of spiral rides, getting into wrist control early, and then that puts you in that funnel. If someone's got a far side hook and a near side wrist control, where the hell are you going to go? You're going to go to the twister or go to the arm triangle.
You don't have a choice, right?
Yeah, you don't unless you know how to clear your wrists.
Right.
You're clearing your wrists, you're getting hit.
And when you have a kid as strong as Bryce is, to have that wrist control on you with the massive grips he has, like it's very difficult to that you don't really have a choice. You're not getting that damn wrist back. That's why I was looking at this and thinking to myself, wow, this kid reminds me of Khabib. If he throws a few more strikes in there, he's literally the same fighter in my mind as what Khabib does. Just smothers you with attacks. So you end up with a guy like Rosa, who is an amazing jiu-jitsu practitioner that is spinning the entire match on defense because of this ridiculous pressure. He never had an opportunity, never had a chance to go to offense because all he could do was think of the whole time he was under attack and trying to survive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I have my opinions on things, but I think the guard's dead, in MMA. I think it's dead. And there's still a lot of players out there that have some bad habits, and because of the growth of the sport, they've been able to get away with it for a little while. And I'm not saying Hail Marys don't work every once in a while, but if in the back of your mind in the scramble, oh, my guard's good, you're worse off having a good guard in MMA than you are not having a good one. Because if your guard sucks, you won't even entertain.
Yeah, you won't even fuck with it, right?
That's right. But if you have a guard good enough to get your ass beat,
right,
most of the time you're going to get your ass beat. And you saw that in that fight, like going for guillotines when Bryce was shooting. Well, you're not even trying to defend the takedown because you think you might get the guillotine. Like, guillotines lose more rounds. For every fight won by guillotine, there were hundreds of rounds lost going for guillotines.
Very, very good point, man. You see that all the time. Guys trying, and then they get stubborn and they hold it and cross mount, and then you get a guy like, what's his name, St. Preux. I can't.
Yeah.
That finishes that Von Flue choke, right? And you're in trouble. What do you think in particular? Give me some specifics why you feel like the guard is dead in modern jiu-jitsu.
Oh, it's not modern jiu-jitsu. I mean
modern MMA. I apologize. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
MMA, right? Yeah.
Well, there's a bunch of reasons. One, you're already losing.
Yeah.
You're already losing because you're on the bottom. Everything's about space, right? Everything in fighting can be broken down into two physical things: the distance and timing. So if you're on the bottom, it's very hard to control the distance because you've got to push somebody off you. So you got to move that blanket that's on top of you, and then the mat's behind you, and the mat's not going anywhere. So your movement's confined. So when you get in a bad space, a bad place, I should say, it takes a ton of energy for you to make space to get away. Like if I'm on top of you in half guard and I start hunting the darce, like you've got to really use a lot of energy to get your head back away from me while I'm pulling your head. If I'm on the top and you start looking at something I don't like, I can always disengage and re-engage because there's nothing stopping me. So just the nature of I guess the physics of it, you're at a disadvantage. And I think that's how wrestling came to be. They just kind of, I'm sure like back in the day, like there were some people getting submissions back like before Pancreas, on their back, but ultimately they were like, oh dude, we don't have to fight MMA anymore. Pretty much the better wrestlers are going to win. So rather than us killing ourselves, we'll just have a wrestling match to see who's better. And I think there's exceptions, but in general, yeah, man, the guard's dead, man, in MMA. And if you disagree, that's okay. You get to disagree. It's all good. And every once in a while, somebody like Cole Miller does, he's retired. He does some sick shit and catches somebody. I won so many fights from my guard too. It was a different time.
Yeah. I think that's important to recognize is that, the guard players of past were fighting in an era when, guys' understanding of jiu-jitsu is very limited. I think at this point in your life, in this point in the world, if you were fighting in the UFC, you had been doing jiu-jitsu for probably 6-7 years at least, probably more like 7-8 years at least, which means you're a solid purple belt, brown belt level jiu-jitsu mind. Even if you're not, you understand, and you've been in someone's guard fighting so many times, you know what it means to push through for a triangle. You know what it means to come up for a sweep. You know what it means to go for that guillotine. You've seen this over and over and over again, and you're just not getting fooled by the tricks of someone maybe when you were fighting that had only been fighting for 2 or 3 years, that was predominantly a striker that learned how to wrestle and can kind of figure some things out from punching from the guard, like getting caught in triangles and these simple 101 things that the martial art of jiu-jitsu is great for.
Well, yeah, and then let's look back at some of these. And look, I'm a jiu-jitsu guy. I compete in IBJJF tournaments. I'm not like you say something like the guard's dead in MMA and people get their panties in a wad. Listen, like the guys getting tapped in the guard, they're the athletes that are like 7-2, 8-0. And they're great strikers, super athletic, hard to take down. And then they end up in Donald Cerrone's guard, who's got a sick guard. He's very tall. Their jiu-jitsu is literally probably blue belt at best, even though they're in the UFC. And they get armbarred. And you say like, oh, the guard's not dead. And it's like, well, yeah, but that guy didn't make it to the UFC because of his ground game. Right. He made it to the UFC because nobody could take him down. And he hit like a truck. And then he got into somebody like Cerrone or somebody's guard. And of course, so, and even that doesn't happen very much. So what, like you talk about the position, you go, okay, well, name me whose guard is going to give Khabib trouble. Nobody. Whose guard gave GSP trouble? Nobody. Whose guard is going to give Bryce Mitchell trouble? Nobody.
Right. Yep.
Nobody.
It's interesting you say that. One more point, and then we can move on. Is the fact that, you know, even when you said that when you have someone in your guard, you're already behind. So if you have someone in your guard, it means that you already had something that happened that puts you on your back. So according to the criteria of reffing or judging a match, like you've already are behind on the scorecards because some action happened that puts you on the ground. And now we're in a situation, doesn't matter how many times you throw up a triangle, how many times you throw up a guillotine, it looks real cool. And if someone that knows jiu-jitsu really appreciate that. A lot of these judges aren't really educated in the nuances of jiu-jitsu. It's just a fact. You see so many guys, it's changing a little bit. You see so many guys that throw up submission attempt after submission attempt that maybe got punched in the face 3 or 4 times while they were doing that still lose the round just because the judges don't get it. They don't see that as scoring opportunities.
Agreed. And that's another factor of it too, is the judging. And I have seen people win rounds from their back, but you've got to dominate from your back. It can't be close.
But again, we're talking about the exception, not the rule. Marcelo Garcia is an amazing grappler, and he always talks about how he doesn't do anything but train jiu-jitsu, but that's the exception. You know, real mortals like us got to lift and do all the other shit to make ourselves good.
Yeah, 100, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more. Let's talk a little bit about, you talked a little bit about how Billy Robinson trained at your gym for a long time, a famous catch wrestler, and you got some training off of him. When I took your seminar, it was based on leg locks, particularly straight ankle lock, and you went into some heel hooks and things like that. How much of your leg lock game was influenced from the catch wrestling of Billy Robinson and maybe some of the other guys you had to come in there and train?
All of it was influenced by Billy. Billy would always say, like, learn how to learn. And, you know, there's certain fundamentals and principles that guide you, that make learning easier. That's why you can watch Instagram videos and learn from them. And white belts look at them and they're just brain explodes. They have no idea. They can't conceptualize what's going on. And one of the things that Billy Robinson helped me out with is power sources. So, like, where are you deriving the power from? And that concept, he's not the one that taught me all those like crazy ankle locks that I do, you know. He didn't teach me all of those. But he understood, like, well, how are you gonna break the leg? And it's like, well, you've got to drive off the hip, you know, if you're going to do the straight ankle lock. Well, you got to drive off the hip, and that's where you're going to get your power. That's the vice that's holding that guy still. You know, like if you want to bend a piece of rebar, you got to put it in a vice and then hold the top of the rebar. You can pull it and bend it. Otherwise, you're never going to bend it. So, like, the foot on the hip was like that power source that you could engage your legs and your hips from, that would hold him still to break the ankle. And that's how he influenced me, and in a lot of other ways as well. But, like, he was in a lot of ways, he was a true like trainer. Whereas, like, a coach can just show you moves, right? Like, you can have a coach just teach class and like, they're good, right? And so you like teach the scissor sweep, arm bar, scissor sweep, triangle, and they go do that. You know, but a trainer comes in and they're like, what the fuck are you doing? You know, you're doing one move, resetting, doing another move. That's not how it works. When you do one move, you go into the next move, and, you know, you got to push the guy, you got to pull the guy, you got to move this guy. That, you know, the trainer brings that energy, that attitude that kind of helps you, like, click it together instead of having to just figure it out over time. Like, they get in your ear and they, you know, that's how Billy was. He'd be like, what do you like? He would see us grabbing each other and letting go, and, like, grab the head and let go wrestling. And he pulled me aside one day. He's like, what are you guys doing? Like, when you grab somebody, you should grab them. They shouldn't be able to get away from you. Like, it's like, that's in your mind. You know what I mean? Yeah. And one day he told me about that. One day he was really big on wrist control. And I started grabbing people's wrists in their guard. Yeah, so I'm on top, they're in the close guard. I grab their wrist, I punch it to their belly. It was an attitude. I just started doing it. And this other black belt that I trained with before, he's like, dude, have you been lifting weights? And I hadn't been doing anything. I just changed my mentality. Like, when I grab your wrist, I'm not going to let you get it back. Yeah. And anyways, that's how Billy influenced me. It wasn't like he was an encyclopedia. He never had to think when I had a question. He always had the answer. And it was always an answer I didn't expect. But it wasn't like I was downloading his encyclopedia. He was just such a great wealth of knowledge and experience and passion that he was able to help in that way. Like he was really like, he was a trainer.
I think about that. It's interesting you talked about that with controlling the body and not just letting them go, but forcing them to try to work their way out of it. And it kind of goes to the same principles we talked about with Bryce and his fighting style, is that, you know, when you're controlling someone and they have to fight to relinquish themselves, they're not thinking about being offensive. They're not thinking about what's going to come next. They're thinking about, holy shit, I want to get my wrist free just because I don't like this asshole doing it. So thereupon now it's eliciting a response where you can go down your funnel of techniques that work off of whatever response, whatever way he tried to free his wrist up or to free his head up.
Yeah, exactly. And that, I mean, you know, when you say it out loud, it sounds like obvious,
right?
But it's not, you know, like we know it. Like somebody hears us say that, they're like, of course, why wouldn't you do it any other way? But it's like, right. No, man, like you start doing stuff and you do it like all types of dumb, and it takes time to develop that stuff. But yeah, you know, it starts with the grips, you know, and nothing's free. Nothing's free on the mat. It shouldn't be if you're going to be a force to be reckoned with. Like,
no, you should learn, and it's again all the things that make jiu-jitsu great. You elicit response, whether you're doing it with pressure, whether you're doing it with your fluid techniques and just approach of giving yourself your opponent little traps in the direction you want to do, or whether you're doing it pain compliance. You're making your opponent do what you want them to do, and that's how you win at the next level. That's how you win at the greatest level. Because like if I go against you in a match, very rarely are you going to have people that are going to be able to go, okay, I'm going to go for what I'm going to go the first time I'm going to do it, and I'm going to land that straight ankle lock, or I'm going to land that guillotine. When you're going against someone like yourself or someone like me that's been doing jiu-jitsu for, 10, 15 years, like we understand what's happening. You got to fool us, you got to trick us, you got to elicit those responses, you got to use those little stimuli to keep us off our guard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
So I got a couple more questions about leg lock game, because you are a leg lock specialist, and I thoroughly enjoyed your seminar. I thought it was one of the most intuitive seminars I've been in. Just some of the concepts you put inside of my brain. So we had Gokor on about a week or so ago, and we asked him a few questions about this, and I asked him a particular question that, he's a very, very logically minded person and didn't really give me the answer that I wanted, but whatever. He had his own approach to it. I'm just curious about the different approaches between the catch wrestling approach to the leg lock concept versus some of the more modern approaches that you see from John Danaher and the new modern jiu-jitsu approach to leg locks. And the way I preface this, and just the way that I kind of think about it, is that when you think about the Danaher approach and the new modern approach, it's more about controlling the position through the ashi or through the lace and pinning someone on the ground first and immobilizing them, and then working into the submissions that come off of that. When I think about the catch wrestling approach, I think more about going after the actual limb or going off of the straight ankle lock first, thereupon creating some kind of a scramble and being prepared to work off of what your opponent gives you. Am I wrong in saying that, or is that something that maybe I'm misunderstanding?
I think you're misunderstanding that. First of all, let me just say, I'll ruffle some feathers here. Catch wrestling is more or less dead. Right. Like Billy Robinson was the last of them.
Everyone I've spoken to that's a catch wrestling expert says the same thing, by the way.
Yeah. So it's I'm not trying to ruffle feathers. So I'll give you my opinion, and I will say it's just my opinion, but my opinion holds more weight than most people's because I had the privilege of training under Billy Robinson. The difference between, and everybody knows this, the difference between Danaher and Billy Robinson is the rule sets. What were the catch wrestlers doing? They were trying to pin you. Okay, they were trying to get on top of you and pin you, hold you down against your will, put your back on the mat against your will. And in the process of you fighting the pin, ankle locks came up. You post up on your leg to get up. You could throw a leg, you could throw a hook in and do a twister. You could do a calf slicer. If I take you down on your back, I could sit back for an ankle lock if I thought that was going to be a quicker path to victory than the pin. But it was based off the pin. It was based off wrestling. And that's the difference. If you're allowed to sit down on your butt, which doesn't translate to fighting, realistically, you're going to end up with a different like tactic. But I think that's the difference, is that we weren't in sport grappling. We live in a little bit of a fairy tale because we're able to sit on our butt and not even lose points, let alone get punched in the mouth. And so we get to go down those rabbit holes. And that's fine. I love it. I pull guard all the time. Like, I've got no problem with it. But if you're training people to fight MMA, you would have more of a catch attitude to it. So I think that's the main difference there.
So you talked about the idea of sitting on your butt and attacking in situations like that. Based upon that, how do you feel about applying leg locks in an MMA setting or in a self-defense setting or martial arts setting?
I think it's fine. I think like double outside, what they call double outside ashi. I mean, that's garbage for MMA. Like, you don't want to be in that position at all. I'd much rather be in a single leg X type position. In my opinion, again, like, I'm not saying these things is law, but it's what is with me. So I'm giving my opinion, but people like to take snippets and cry about it. But I like leg locks in MMA. It's just leg locks are not like wrestling. Okay. In general, in wrestling, the more you chain wrestle, the better likelihood you're going to get the takedown. With leg locks, especially in MMA, your first and second attack are your best ones. If you're still on the third and fourth attack in an MMA fight, it's because you're getting the shit kicked out of you and you're stubborn and you don't want to wrestle up. So, like, if I go for the straight ankle lock, or let's say I go for a heel hook or toe hold, I want that heel hook or toe hold. And if you roll, maybe it goes into a knee bar. But after that, if those first two don't work, I need to be wrestling up. I shot my shot. It's all good. Time to get the fuck up. The gig is up. The opportunity was in the first two. Now, we can get into double leg control and things of that nature, and you can start to cheat the system a little bit, especially when there's a huge skill gap between the two athletes. But in general, like leg locks later in the rounds, you got 25 seconds left in the round, go for it. Try to break the guy's ankle. Right. If you miss it, no harm, no foul. But what was I yelling to Bryce in his fight? Stay on top. I don't care about the submission. Okay. If you get it, you get it, but don't go for the armbar from the mount. You keep cooking them.
Right.
Why would we do anything different? Like, we're already winning. Yeah. So that kind of encapsulates my thoughts on it.
I see one of the things that I say a lot in young fighters and my amateur fighters and guys like that are leg lock guys that also fight MMA is that, like, don't forget, 90% of the time when you're going for a leg lock, the sweep is also there too. And just like you talked about the importance of positional dominance and being on top and how the guard is pretty much dead. Like, don't discount the ability that, this is an MMA fight, not a jiu-jitsu match. And when I'm on top of you in your guard or even in, a half guard or whatever, full guard, like, my gravity is on my side to rain down and land punches and do damage and win rounds by scoring. Like, it's very important. Guys kind of forget that dynamic. You really only have a 5-minute section to compete, to go for those submissions. And, like, the reality of finishing a submission in those 5 minutes is it's just not, especially if the guy has good jiu-jitsu. Like, get up, learn how to win rounds by scoring, learn how to understand how to play the cards. There's nothing wrong with that. The submissions and finishes are awesome. That's great. If you get one, go right ahead. But I guarantee you there's more finishes from TKO than there are from submissions 100% across the board. I don't have the pin numbers in front of me, but I bet on that.
No, you're 100% right. And a lot of times we give people too much credit for going for, like, big submissions because we say, like, oh man, they went for it. And that is true. And there's a balance here. But a lot of times it's mental weakness because it's their Hail Mary. They don't want to be there anymore. So they're like, they go for it and hopes. It's kind of like throwing just throwing a head kick with no setup. You know what I mean? Like, you're just like, yeah, you should be setting it up, but you're in such a hurry to get out of there. You're trying to force the win. And a lot of guys with submissions try to force the win and get themselves hurt and lose fights because of that. And it takes more discipline to not chase the armbar that's kind of there than it does to say, fuck that armbar. If you want that armbar, you better wrap it up beautiful and present it to me on a white tablecloth. You know what I mean? If you want that armbar. Otherwise, I'm going to keep punching you in the mouth. You know how it is. If you're mounted and you can't escape the mount, you kind of get half an armbar, hoping the guy will go for the armbar so you can get out of the mount.
Right.
Like, so it takes discipline to not chase every hint of a submission that's in front of you. And I think almost anybody with experience would agree with that.
Yeah, man, I agree 100%, man. Like it's, the one thing I think of when I think of, some of the shortcomings of sport jiu-jitsu is they don't put as much emphasis on positional jiu-jitsu, because I never fought MMA, but I work in a freaking bar and I work as a bouncer in a bar, and I've had tons and tons and tons of real life, martial arts self-defense scenarios where I had to throw some drunk asshole out. And 100% of the time, positional dominance is what saves your life and puts someone on the ground and maintains control of them. Like, I'm not going for no damn arm bar. I ain't going for no sneaky little heel hook. I'm taking the guy on the ground. I'm holding him there. I'm putting my knee on the belly. I'm taking their back and putting them to sleep 100% of the time. And I'm not fucking around with that. And like, positional dominance in sports jiu-jitsu, it's cool to see all the submissions, and I enjoy it as a jiu-jitsu practitioner. I like the idea of expanding the art because it's fun for me. But real life, you don't need all that shit.
Agreed. I think, it all comes down to, wrestling for the most part, with a little bit of blue belt jiu-jitsu, and you're solid. I got a question for you. So, because I bounced, but it was when I was like 19, right. And nobody knew jiu-jitsu back then. But have you had like a purple belt or somebody that like used to train, you go to kick them out and like they actually like resist with like some technique? You're like, oh, I'm going to have to fight this guy.
First of all, like, if they train jiu-jitsu in this town, 90% of the time, I'm not blowing myself up. They're going to know who the fuck I am. You know what I'm talking about? So they're going to be up, and even if they're drunk assholes, I can come over them and be like, hey man, like, come on, dude, what are we doing this for? Like, oh shit, sorry, Coach Kevin, no big deal. Or, there's something about training at a high level. This isn't always the case. There are some assholes out there, but there's something about training at that high of a level and doing it every day that just kind of gets that shit out of your system. You know what I mean? Like, you don't give a fuck about fighting some asshole at a bar, because you do it all day long, man. I fight all day long. I'm rolling around all day long. I got that all out of my system. I have nothing to prove to this civilian. I will say this though, like, if most 9 times out of 10, like, most people in a street altercation have zero training, and knowing jiu-jitsu is like having a superpower, like having some mutant ability that's in your back pocket. And it doesn't take that much jiu-jitsu to get to that point. Like, civilians against a trained jiu-jitsu practitioner, man, they have no chance, especially if it's a one-on-one situation. They're done for before they even know what happened. They're done.
Yeah, it's been my experience as well. I just, as the sport gets bigger, now you're going to have yahoos training just because there's just so many more people. The old school guys, I remember that being true too. But I don't really go out into clubs and stuff anymore because I'm just that old dude that doesn't want to be around the loud music. I want to be in like a lounge and like having conversation. I love podcasts because of this shit. You're sitting around talking to people, like that's what I want to do. But I'm glad to hear that. It's such a powerful thing to know how to fight, and you hate to see it misused. And as tacky as it sounds, like, I believe in being like a champion for freedom and justice. That was something that this first gym I ever started at, like, they had those taekwondo like mantras that you'd have to like recite. And I believe that, man. Like, if I see an injustice going on, like, it's my civic responsibility to go and step in and get involved, whether it's somebody getting mugged, or a woman, or a small dude getting bullied, like it's our duty, if we have the ability, to get involved. And that's a real thing to me, man. So I'm glad that
100%, man. I can't tell you the number of times, like, I've been out and seen some shit go down. I'm like, fuck. Like, I don't want to do this, but like, I have to. Like, like, if you're an EMT guy and you see an accident, like, it's almost your responsibility to go over there and make sure everything's okay. Like, if I'm out and I see someone picking on some poor kid that can't defend himself, or like some bullshit going on, I feel like it's my obligation as a trained person, in the Bushido code that I believe in, to go over there and do some good with what I learned. Because first and foremost, before anything else, before we talk about sport jiu-jitsu, before we talk about training in the gym, before we talk about MMA, like jiu-jitsu is designed for a martial art for self-defense, to protect yourself. That's what the original inception of it was. So because I am trained at the level that I am, I feel like it's my duty, just like you said, to protect people that aren't, to protect the innocent, the sheepdog in me, you know?
Yep, for sure.
Right. I commend you for that. Let's keep, you got a little more time? You want to keep talking, bro? I'm fucking bored. You want to
Yeah. I'm
cool,
good,
man.
brother.
Yeah, let's keep going. This is fun. So you talked a little bit about Bryce Mitchell training mostly in Nogi and not doing a whole lot of Ghee stuff. Like, how do you feel about guys that train specifically no Ghee and don't ever put a Ghee on? Do you feel like they're still doing jiu-jitsu? Do you feel like there's some differences between that?
I'll say I think that I don't think you need to train in the Ghee to be good at jiu-jitsu. I mean, Bryce proves it, and so do a lot of athletes. In my gym, you're going to get better faster just doing both, because you're gonna have more mat time that way. We just have a ton of great practitioners in the Ghee, and there's a lot. You're just gonna have more access to mat time. Bryce cross-trained a lot, so he was always able to hit no Ghee and do whatever. And like, my gym is huge; it's 8,000 square feet, so like you're never like fighting for mat space. But what I tell the MMA guys is, you know, like I did this in a class once. You know, I was like, all right, so Bryce is the good grappler here. You know, he's the best grappler, and he's subbing everybody. So like, you know, how many different subs have you got, Bryce? How many different subs have you got your whole career? And he's like, armbar, triangle, rear naked choke. This was before the twister. That's it. Armbar, triangle, rear naked choke. So those no-gi guys get really dialed in on their balance and their focus on the fundamental positions, where, you know, in the gi, we've got to deal with so many different grips and different lapel strategies. And you don't got to worry about loop chokes. It's a guillotine or not a guillotine. In the gi, you got to worry about loop chokes. You got to worry about guillotines. You got to worry about the fact that the guy can artificially pull you out of position.
Or hold you down artificially with a grip. That's
right. So, you know, in a perfect world, the analogy I give people about this question, Kevin, is let's say me and you make a bet. We have twins, right? And me and you don't have twins because that's hard because we're both dudes. So I don't think
whatever. Hey, it's a new world now, though, baby.
To
the folks at home, there's nothing wrong with two men having twins. Just so it's clear.
Yeah, we're the same dude.
Don't want to pull that now, baby. I need my image. Go ahead.
If me and you take twins, right? 270-pound kids, equal athleticisms, equal frames of mind, right? And we make a side wager. Who's going to win? You train your student, I train my student for an MMA fight. Okay. That's the parameters. And we're going to do it for 6 months. How many days a week? You're going to train this kid twice a day, right? Because you want to beat me. You want to win the money. Now I'm going to train my kid twice a day. How many days a week are you going to put that kid in a gi?
Yeah.
Not one.
Not one.
Not one. Okay. Okay. We do the same wager for a year. How many days are you going to put that kid in a gi?
Yeah. Probably not.
Not one.
Yeah. Right.
That's the reality of it, man. And I love sport jiu-jitsu, but it's a sport. I love judo and MMA. Judo's got a ton of big throws that happen because you can't be so patient and balanced. When you're fighting, you're not so measured. So you can get big Harai Goshis, Uchimatas, Seyanagis in MMA fights because they're there because of the nature of the fight. Does that mean you need to be training in a gi to do the judo? No. Judo is its own sport that has something to offer. And jiu-jitsu is its own sport. In the gi, jiu-jitsu is its own sport that has something to offer. But you can absolutely do MMA without ever training in a gi, and you can be a great black belt without ever training in the gi.
What do you say to the guys, the old traditional heads, that will tell you that if you're not training gi jiu-jitsu, then you're not really doing jiu-jitsu. You're not really getting everything there is in jiu-jitsu.
I would say to sound like arrogant, that's like your opinion, man. You know, like fine, you know, like that's your agenda mostly. That's fine, man. I mean,
like your opinion, man. I like that.
Yeah, it's all good.
Let's talk a little bit about you some more, man. You're an interesting cat, man. Like I said, dude, you have I as soon as I talked to you that one time, and I'm super mad I never wrote that damn article about you, Sim. I'm just a knucklehead. So
It's all good, man.
But I had a great time just shooting the shit with you, man. Like it's just fun for me as someone that truly loves the sport to have someone to pick the brain of someone that is that's been around the game for so long, that have, details, not just about leg locks, it's just about jiu-jitsu in general. I love to learn from people like you. So tell me a little bit of what it was like for you in the tough house, because I know that's something that a lot of people don't really get to experience. Like,
Sure.
How did you feel? First of all, what season were you on?
I was on season 8, and it was miserable. It was absolutely miserable. So I am a dorky guy by nature. Like, I'm super interested in like investing in real estate, scaling gyms. Not just training people like Bryce or TJ Brown or Hillary Williams. I've been lucky to train some of the best. Hillary Williams was a world champion, black belt world champion student of mine, got a black belt for 4 years. And Bryce Mitchell is one of the best. TJ Brown, somebody people don't know about yet, but he's one of the best martial artists I ever trained. That's all great. But I also have this real dorky side of me, and I'm really into like stoicism and philosophy and all sorts of dorky stuff, man. A lot of introspective stuff. So you put me in that house, and it's a lot like a frat house,
right?
And I don't fit into that. And on top of that, I was so paranoid about because I already had a gym at that point. I was so paranoid about being portrayed the wrong way. Like, what would it mean to my business if they saw me getting drunk and like cutting loose, or like getting into a fight? Like, I'm supposed to be this, pillar of the community, or like, the guy that people bring their kids to learn from. And so I didn't feel like I was really myself there. I was always like looking at myself kind of like an out of body experience, like trying to measure myself in every interaction. And then, like I said, it was kind of like a frat house where I want to sit around and have conversations like this. And, they want to sit around and, drink beer and talk about, hooking up with girls. And I'm down to do that too. That's like, that for a lot of years, that was a great pastime of mine. But, it was really tough to be there for 6 weeks, man.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm a similar minded person. Like, I don't mind shooting the shit. I could be one of the guys just like everybody else, but I'm also someone that appreciates, I'm somewhat of a Renaissance man, I like to believe. And to not be able to have an intelligent conversation or completely be, saturated with the whole frat house, young MMA fighter, 20 somethings. I would lose my absolute mind if I had to do that for an extended period of time. Was there anything you did to find solace to be able to because they don't have books, they don't have anything for you to do, right?
No.
Was there anything you were able to do? Any people in particular you were able to hang out with that you felt like you could have some kind of an adult conversation with about those things with?
No, not really, man. The thing that I did, because I lost on the season pretty early, and we had an amazing coaching staff. Daniel Valvergi, he's with MMA Masters in Miami. He's one of the best jiu-jitsu guys I've ever seen and trained with in my life. And he kind of has a low profile for his skill level. And Minotauro was the coach. And then Amari Batechi, who was undefeated for like 9 years in Brazil, jiu-jitsu wise. So I just kind of like tried to learn as much jiu-jitsu as I could once I was out. And that's what I did. And so I just came into the gym every day and was asking questions and trying to roll with Amari or Valvergi. And, but man, honestly, I was just buying time, just ready to get out of there.
How much of what went down, some of the antics and things that went down, were scripted by the producers? Maybe not scripted, but
none of it, man.
None of it.
People act wild because they want their TV time.
Right.
And they're bored, and you're getting people at a testosterone driven young age. But like everything that happened pretty much happened, man. Like, it was like the cameras are there 24/7, and there's a lot of downtime. That it's like when I'm at the UFC with Bryce, like you see me walking out with him in the corner and celebrating. Like but that was only a tiny fraction of the week. Most of the week we're sitting around in a hotel room, or I'm watching him sweat in the sauna, or I'm going and running and grabbing a Pedialyte and granola bars. Like,
right.
it's real boring. But I will say, in all fairness, that season, I can say, even to my own, misbenefit of not having a good time there, that's just what it was, man.
Yeah, you talked about like hanging out with Bryce on like a fight day, and I could tell you there's not much more boring than hanging out with a fighter on fight day. Like literally, you do nothing. Your entire job is to just make sure your guy is calm. Hey, you good, man? Anything I do for you? All right, cool. You want me to leave you alone? Cool, I'm gonna leave you alone. You know what I mean? You're not coaching them a whole lot because you don't want to put anything in their head. If you ain't learned it by now, you ain't gonna learn it. You don't want to give them anything to think about, yay or nay. You don't want to change their mindset at all. You just spent 6 weeks getting them in the right place. Like the day of the fight, all you do is just chill. You look at them, you kind of make sure they're okay. If you see any kind of visions of maybe they're a little bit off, hey man, like you cool? Anything I do for you? Cool. If not, leave them the fuck alone. That's in like getting ready for a fight day and coming out for a fight day is there ain't much different than that, man.
Yeah, and you kind of really know your fighters too. Like TJ Brown, he loves to he likes to get distracted, so we'll talk a lot.
Yeah.
Bryce Mitchell's different. Like he doesn't need to be distracted. He's fine. He's got his mind made up, and he doesn't need to be messed with much. So like you're right, fight day, you just tailoring whatever personality traits your fighter has. You're just trying not to mess anything up, not trying to put, like you said, put anything in their head. Just keep them as comfortable as possible and feeling as good as possible going into that cage.
So you brought up an interesting point that I want to kind of touch on a little bit. You talked about how like Bryce needs one thing and TJ needs another thing. So how much of your job as a coach is geared towards understanding the psychology of your fighters and the things that motivate them?
You know what? I'll answer that in a different way too. It's not only that as like a coach for fighters. How much of my job is that as a jiu-jitsu coach, which is how I make money?
Right.
All of it. I believe that's what separates me from my competition, is that I'm looking at my athletes and I'm honest with them, because I had so many mental insecurities, and I didn't have a mental coach really coming up, and I didn't even know about that stuff. I had no idea about sports psychology and psychology in general. And so like it's everything knowing what your fighters need in MMA. And that's easy though. You expect that. I do that with my jiu-jitsu students. I can watch them roll, and you pretty much roll like your personality. If you're like, I'm a pretty conservative guy, so like I don't give up position a lot. You know what I mean? Like I'm pretty conservative on the mat as well. And so for some people that works really, like Bryce Mitchell believes in himself way too much. Like he believes in himself. What do I mean by that? For MMA, you can't believe in yourself too much. That's why he's such a good MMA fighter. But like he's building a barn right now, a 40 by 80 barn, a metal barn. And he literally thinks he can do it himself. And I'm telling him, you're going to fucking kill yourself. You're fighting in the UFC. Like the people that do this for a living come with all this equipment for a reason. They're professionals. If they could do it cheaper, better, without, make more money, no, they would do it that way. They do it the way it needs to be done. But you can't tell Bryce that. Bryce is like so headstrong and like believing him that he can do anything, and he can do it. But it's not at what cost exactly. And he's still young. But that's his personality, and you gotta know, like, you got to know people's personalities to work with them. And you hear Bryce talk about that. He says, people say I need to leave and go find better coaches and like get into a bigger camp. And he's like, well, so-and-so is the best coach in the world. Well, he's not the best coach in the world for me. That's not the best coach because he doesn't know me. And you gotta, and he's right. Like William McLaughlin, who was his coach from day one, a father figure to him, he's in his corner every time, and he doesn't train with Willie a lot anymore, but Willie knows him, and they have that bond, and it's a long answer to your question, but in everything, that's what, if you're just teaching arm bars and scissor sweeps, and here's how you escape an arm bar, then you're no different than every other coach. What's going to make you different? It's the mental game. It's reading people. I have one of my best students. He's an amazing grappler, and he had really bad performance anxiety. And we talked about it, and it wasn't an elephant in the room because I just call it what it is. He would admit it. He wasn't even lying about it, and his best tournament to date, he didn't get to train for. And right before the tournament, I said, we were at Masters Worlds. I said, hey, man, you didn't have a camp. So you can't go in here and do anything but just jump in their shit. Like, you're not going to have the luxury of not coming into this thing headstrong and just putting your best foot forward from the go. And he roasted the first 3 people he competed against. And it's Masters Worlds, right? So it's like everybody's tough. He murked them. He lost his 4th match, which would have been the match to get into the podium. And he lost that match on a strategy error. And I was so proud of him because you're going to lose matches like that. If you lose because you didn't know better, you didn't have the experience, okay, you can live with that. But if you lose because you don't pull the trigger, then it's hard to grow from that on a jiu-jitsu level. And if you beat yourself up, he had a fantastic performance. And so it took having to compete without training for him to just open up and go, I don't have a choice. There's no way I'm going to win if I don't go in there like an animal. And he went in there and he opened up, and it was such a breakthrough tournament for him. That's Matt Ferris, good, one of the more talented people I've ever trained. Only gets to train a couple days a week. Unbelievable. And he had that performance anxiety, and we were able to work through it. And anyways, all that to say, like, knowing your fighters, and getting in their head, that's what separates the great coaches from the average coaches.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, man. I feel like one of my strong points, I worked as a bartender for, 20 years, man. I know psychology because you have to know it, because you have to learn how to talk to people. You have to know what everyone wants to hear, because it's your job to entertain people, Based upon that, I think as a coach, it's so important just to understand how to motivate people, because like one guy, you can push and yell at him, put your finger in your face, and that's going to motivate him. But you do that to the wrong guy, it's going to shut him off. And you got to take that guy and kind of put your arm around him. You got to kind of listen to him. You got to kind of let them evolve on their own. You have to know who is who and what you're going to do with who, because you're going to turn people off when you're trying to do the right thing.
Let's segue on that for a second. That's a great analogy, being a bartender and being a coach, because if you're there just pouring drinks, you're not doing your fucking job.
No.
You know what I memean? And some people teach classes that way. They just pour the drinks. So that's a great analogy. Another thing is you have students come in and they tell you, like, I need you to yell at me. That's how I learn. Like, you know what I mean? They want you to be like their old football coach or something. I've never had a good fighter that liked to be coached that way.
No.
I've never had a good fighter that wanted to be yelled at and pushed with that kind of like attitude. You know what I mean? Like, all my fighters, man, they may not articulate this, but I know what they want, because you can tell how they give you feedback. They want to be built up. Positive reinforcement, man. That's how you do it. My opinion.
100%. Man. It's funny. One more thing I laughed about. You talked about Bryce Miller as being, his incredible belief in himself. When we were talking about Bryce earlier, I actually wrote that down on my little notepad here. Belief in himself. It's just to show you that we were on the same page. I just never got around to bringing it up. Like, one of the things I thought of when I saw him competing and training was just his enormous belief in himself to be able to go after what he does. And because it takes belief to be able to continue that line of pressure as much as he does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll tell you one, because it's good to talk about Bryce, because people want to hear about him, because he's the next big thing. One time he wanted to fight this guy. This was probably 4 years ago. And the guy was a world champion in Jiu-Jitsu, and he was trying to fill in and fight for the guy. And I was like, why do I want to fight that guy? And he's a world champion. And he was like, I think I can beat him. And I was like, man, dude, like, and like I questioned him, and like, that was my own insecurities. You know what I mean? And I could see it in Bryce's face. He kind of just got out of the conversation. And I thought about it. I was like, who the fuck am I to tell him that he can't beat that guy? And that stuck with me, that exchange that we had. Nothing happened. There was no drama, no BS. I could just tell. And now look at him. He's out. He's grappling better than any of the world champions that are in MMA. Yeah. The guys that were world champions going into MMA. Now, not any of them. I mean, Rodolfo's killing it right now, but you know what I mean? Like, he's doing his thing. And one day you're going to see him fight another like crazy good jiu-jitsu guy, and you'll see. His jiu-jitsu is not good for MMA. His jiu-jitsu is good for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, he some of the best jiu-jitsu I've seen, like literally some of the best jiu-jitsu and MMA I've seen in a long, long time, man. They just a clinic, an absolute clinic of what he was able to do against such a game guy, man. It was fun for me to watch, man.
Yeah.
So to talk a little bit about that belief in yourself, because myself as a competitor, I've done some pretty cool things. I've competed on some pretty good shows. I was on Kasai. I had some pretty cool events. I've been on a couple fight to wins. I've competed. I do pretty well at the ADCC. I never won that damn thing, but not yet anyway. I'm still going to give it a shot.
Oh yeah.
The point I'm trying to make is like there was a point in my competing career where you have to accept the fact that you deserve to be there. You have to have that belief in yourself to not be the guy that's just there to show up. You're there just to kind of participate, and all these other guys are so good and so amazing. I'm just glad I get to share the match with them. Like, you can't go about competing in that mindset. You have to tell yourself, you know what, man, like, these guys are human. I deserve to be here, and I'm going to go out there and do my best to win this damn thing, not to be the guy that's just happy to be a part of the thing.
Sure.
Like, how do you see that in MMA guys? Like, some guys are born with it, and some guys kind of have to work for it a little bit more. Like, where do you feel like that lies?
I think everybody's different. Some people just believe in themselves. I think I think it pays to be, I won't say a certain type of intelligence. There's a certain type of mind that does really well in MMA. And it pays to have those types of personality traits to go in there and not overthink it. I have a lot of anxiety naturally. I didn't know I suffered from anxiety until, a couple of years ago. But it's been there like my whole life, and I overthink things, and I have a lot of trouble being in the moment. I've been in the UFC, in big grappling events. My mind is thinking about things that are totally irrelevant to the moment. It's insane. And so I think it helps to not overthink things. And as far as, it comes back with all the cliches we've heard. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, swing the bat, like, you can't hit the home run if you don't swing. And life's not defined. Again, these are cliches, but as we get older, we start to realize why cliches are cliches is because they make sense. That's just pretty much how I feel about it, man. Like, you do have to try. If you don't try, it's 100% failure rate. And settling for, like, well, all I wanted to do was get on the podium. Fuck that. You know what I mean? Like, you're in the medal rounds, like, cool, like, good for you. You're going to be on the podium, but like, it's one match at a time, and there's another match to go. Fuck the podium. Like, it was never for me about being a UFC champion or being a world champion. It was always about just that first match. I just want to, just one match at a time. I just got to beat this guy, and then I got to beat that guy. And that's one of the things about competing, Kevin, that and that I think everybody should compete. And a lot of coaches won't push their people to compete because they're scared they'll lose them. I think about 80% of my students compete, and I have a big gym. So that's bullshit. You can develop a culture of people that are willing to put it on the line. My best performance ever was at Masters Worlds one year. It was the first year I did it. I ended up placing, I got third there. There's 57 black belts on the podium. I'm just 57 black belts in the division, Masters 2. And I won my first 3 matches by submission and lost my 4th match. I didn't think I needed to be there because I trained with Danielson Pimenta. Pimenta, I would see him winning 2-0 by advantage. And Pimenta just, he can grapple me like a child, the way that grappling with Bryce is. I mean, he's just so much better than me. So I thought I wasn't good enough to legitimately be there. And I didn't want to be a tourist. Like at Masters Worlds, there's a lot of tourists, guys that don't need to be there, but they want to be able to say they grappled Rafa Mendez or somebody. So I went there, and I had 2 choices. One was to lay down and die and just pay my entry fee and go out there and fuck off. But I told myself the same thing that I told my student, Matt Ferris, I was talking about earlier, that didn't have a camp. I said, the only way, I only have one small chance of winning this tournament. And the only way I'm going to win this tournament is by ripping people's ankles off. That's the only way. I am not going to go out there and sweep and pass my way to a world championship. That's not me. I am only going to have a chance if I just go all in. So I started telling my students before the trip, I said, I'm just going all in on my ankle locks, man. I'm going to go out there from the go, and I'm all in. And I won my first 3 matches by ankle locks, and ended up getting on the podium. And it was the best day I ever had. And it was because of the competition. Had I never competed, I wouldn't have had that breakthrough to believe in myself. And then I carried that on, into Pans, and I ended up medaling at Pans with the same attitude. And, I've lost matches since then. I probably lost matches because of that. But that mental game, man, like you can't get it just talking to yourself. You have to get into the fire. You have to swing the bat. You have to be willing to lose.
You have to be willing to put it on the line when it matters. It's so much different when you're at the gym and you're rolling and it doesn't matter because you just tap and it's just start over again. When it matters, when there's that finality to it, when you tap, fuck, man, this is over. I flew out to Las Vegas. This sucks. There's that fear. There's that fear. All my friends are watching. I'm on the big stage. Everyone's gonna think I suck. It's overcoming that just, God, it does. I'm right with you about competing. I wish all my guys would compete.
It's such a good thing to develop the thing. So if you can get over that and do your best, knowing that you might fail anyways, and you do your best anyways, obviously it translates to everything else you do in your life. Like do your absolute best. And if you don't win, you can live with yourself because you did your best. And then you think about to apply that to relationships. If you have a marriage that doesn't work out and you can say that you did your absolute best, you're going to be able to live with it. And it's like, it's true in everything in life. I'm a huge fan of competing for those, not because it's jiu-jitsu. Fuck, jiu-jitsu's our pastime. You know what I'm saying? Jiu-jitsu is like just something that we do. Like when we look back on our life, like we're going to wonder, like, did we swing the bat? Did we go for it? And I think that we have the privilege to compete in jiu-jitsu, which is a combat sport. And I think that gives us a window to like how to live our lives in a better way. I wrote
so much of what you said just holds true with me, man. Like it's why I think of jiu-jitsu so much more than just jiu-jitsu. It's so much more than me than martial arts, so much more than me than self-defense. You're going to learn all those things. You're going to be a bad bitch if you get your black belt in jiu-jitsu, but you're going to grow so much as a person for so many different reasons just because you learn how to deal with that grind. You learn how to pay attention and keep your mind straight under the ultimate stressor, which is, some 250-pound dude smashing down on top of you, sweating, breathing in your ear. You have to learn how to think under that duress and focus and keep your calm and, overcoming your demons and pushing through. There's not too much else in the world that is beautiful to me is the art of jiu-jitsu is in that regard. And it just changes you so much more. Like jiu-jitsu, it's the hobby, but it's really a metaphor for making your life better, man. It really is.
Yeah, you said it well.
Yeah. So one more thing, I'd like to end it off in there, but I ain't done talking with you guys. That was fun. That was beautiful. we'll keep going. I'm enjoying talking to you, man. You just along the same concept of living in the moment and learning how to just deal with what you have now and not thinking about the past or thinking about what's to come or the repercussions. Is like I talked to Bernardo Faria one time. He came down and taught a seminar at our gym. We went to go have lunch with him after, and he told me a little story about competing that I thought kind of held true with me. He talked about how, Bernardo Faria has won, I think it's like 8 times he won the worlds or something like that. He's amazing. He's got a ton of world championships. He told me about how, he's had training camps where he trained his ass off. He had the best training camp of his life. Like everything went perfect. Everything was awesome. He feels like he's in the best shape of his life, and he goes out and loses his first match. And then he's had training camps where, like, God, man, he had a cold, hurt his ankle. Everything went like shit. He's literally just showing up just to show up, and he ends up winning the whole damn thing. And I think the reason I'm bringing this up is because we talked about living in the moment and not allowing the idea of good or bad that led up to it. Like when you're competing, it's all about that moment. And I think that's something that I do very, very well when I compete. I don't give a shit about what happened. It's that time to go out there and get it done on the mat and that finality of it. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I have we have an analogy that we share at the gym, and it's like time to clock in. So if I'm paying you to do a job, I don't give a fuck that your girlfriend's just broke up with you. And I don't care how you feel. If it's time to clock in, I'm paying you. You better do the work.
Right.
I'm paying. If you can't come in, don't come in. But when you clock in, you clock in. And it's flipping the switch. Like, I'm clocked in. So like, I like adversity in a camp. I always use it because there's always some. We didn't have any in Bryce's last fight. Like, the camp went perfect. But like, normally when there's adversity and the fighter could like take that and like get into a negative, I'm like, hey man, like, good thing this happened, because if the camp's perfect, the fight's gonna suck, because something bad's always gonna happen. So you might as well get the bad in the camp. But man, you got to clock in, man. It's time to clock in. And you had a good camp, you had a bad camp. It's irrelevant at this point. Now we're in the fight. So it's good to have the best preparation you can, the perfect diet, do everything you can to give yourself the best chance of the fight. But you know what cliche is bullshit? Train hard, fight easy.
Right.
No. Train hard, fight hard.
Right.
Because as much as you think, like it's not like 50-50, train hard, compete well. No, like, it's all about the preparation when you're preparing. And then it's none of that even matters when it's time to fight, because it's all about the fight. Like, you have to fight hard, train hard, fight hard, clock in. Nothing you did in camp is going to make the fight easier. You're still going to have to dig deep. You're still going to feel fatigue. You're going to have to trust your recovery. You're going to have to fight. So that mental space, like, and that's why people like yourself or Bernardo or anybody, like, you can have these great showings when you didn't have a great camp, because you clocked in. It didn't matter. Michael Jordan played with the flu and had a great game because he clocked in. It's time to clock in, man. No excuses. Now it's time. You know.
How amazing is that fucking documentary, by the way? Did you see that thing yet? Have you watched it yet?
No.
Oh man, dude. When you get done with me, go watch The Last Dance. I'm telling you, it's that good, because you're about my age. You remember